5 minutes to go. Three minutes.
Good morning. Sport Integrity Week put on by Sega, powered by MasterCard, into the final day. Ben Jacobs with you throughout the course of what is a very busy schedule, focusing on a key topic, which is protection of youth, children in particular, and more broadly speaking, safeguarding. Do get in contact with us. I know a number of you are experts in this field, and we've got some really interesting panels coming up. Just to mark your card before I introduce the next panel, which is called Safeguarding Children from Moral and Sexual Abuse in Sport, at 12:30 CET, that's 11:30 GMT. We've got sports betting in esports. That's just picking up on yesterday's theme. And then at 1 o'clock CET, that is at 12 GMT, an Atlantic perspective on the challenges and opportunities of football youth development in today's COVID environment. So we've got lots to get through. And like I say, really encouraging you to get involved through the app. You can ask questions. And in addition, tell us on social media where you're listening from. And we'd love you to interact with us and engage. Take a picture of you watching the conference and generally give us your thoughts as well. All of the panels will eventually be on YouTube. We'll have clips on social media as well. And I can tell you that over 2,500 of you so far this week have been tuning in, and lots of popular panels, in particular the one on piracy, and yesterday's signing as well by India on Track, one of our keen partners that was watched by many of you too. And again, you can relive that historic moment and partnership between SIGA and an organization based out of India on our social media as well. So do get involved, ask plenty of questions, and we will now kick things off with our next panel. Like I say, it's called Safeguarding Children from Moral and Sexual Abuse in Sport. And our moderator is João Paulo Almeida, the Director General of the Portuguese Olympic Committee, who's been involved with SIGA on a number of different projects and is an expert in this particular area. The panel itself has pertinence, of course, because of things like the Larry Nassar scandal in athletics. British gymnastics is going through a current scandal in this particular area as well. And recently, the head of the Afghan Football Association was banned for life by FIFA and currently has an arrest warrant out for him for alleged sexual abuse against players from the Afghan women's national team. So unfortunately, there is prevalence of both moral and sexual abuse in sport, and our panel will now discuss this topic. So João, it is a very good morning. Bom dia to you, and I hand over now for you to set the scene a little bit further and introduce your panel.
Thanks, Ben. Bon dia to you too. Good morning for this last day of Sports Integrity Week with a full agenda dedicated to youth development and child protection. With me, we will be moderating this high-level webinar throughout the next hour. I have a couple of experts on safeguarding here in Portugal. Joana Alexandre, President of the Pedagogical Council of ISCTE, Institute of University of Lisbon. Cristina Almeida, Senior Official of the Portuguese Institute for Sport and Youth, the governmental body of sport in Portugal. Please say hello to our audience. Bruno Avelar, partner in Cantara Sports, and Miguel Neri, Assistant Professor at the Faculty of Human Kinetics and Faculty of Health Sciences and Sport of the European University. Good morning to you all. We have seen throughout these last months, as Ben raised a couple of issues on sexual abuse, harassment that have paving the way to hopefully a new era and reform on safeguarding children from moral and sexual abuse in sport. We know that a long way has to be done to achieve and to meet high standards on this issue, but you are all committed to drive and deliver this reform here in Portugal. And this is a unique opportunity to share with our audience what we have done here, the main obstacles that we still need to overcome, but at the same time, the progress that have been done to reach meaningful and tangible goals, to have a sport where the health of athletes and the integrity of the athletes are really safeguarded from this kind of threats. And first and foremost, please feel free to raise your questions in the app. I will follow you and I will ask your questions to our panel. But to break the ice and to kick off this webinar, it's very important to share with us, Cristina, your vision about how the Portuguese government has been tackling this issue and moving it up in the political agenda, as obviously we know that there are other issues on sports integrity that have another level of priority from governments, from sport governing bodies, rather than sexual harassment and sexual abuse, despite we all know that there is a long story of scandals in sports related to this issue. Cristina, I will hand over the floor to you.
Okay. Hello, good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here. And I am very grateful for the invitation from SIGA and from our NOC for this opportunity to talk about this issue in sport, especially abuse of child and young athletes, an issue that has been a taboo for a quite long time in our sport family. I would like to remind you that this is a sport topic in the sport policy since the mid-90s. So it has been for a long time an issue of importance, but an issue that is very silent one. So we should speak more about it, discuss, reflect, and especially act. So this is also an opportunity to update on our side, especially on the projects we have been involved in the couple last years, which are joint projects from the European Commission and the Council of Europe, related on safeguarding children in sport, especially one that we have now in progress that we think that will be a very strong and sustainable actions that we could settle here in Portugal, that it will make some difference. This new project is based on one of the most important developments in sport policy regarded with athletes' safety, which is the international standards on children in sport, that has been produced with involvement of UK and UNICEF. So it is a very good and solid methodology and policy that I think it will have important results. But actually our involvement in issue in Portugal started in 2017, especially with the involvement in the joint project from European Union and Council of Europe also, which was the Pro-Safe Sport project. But this project was especially focused on the awareness raising and in building some capacity building resources that we have now online, we have spread through our sport organizations. And regarding this project, there was a very successful campaign, which was the Start to Talk campaign that we launched in 2019 at national level. But then in 2000 and it was in 2018, and in 2019 we started a roadshow at local level, involving our regional officers and involving local clubs and protection of children and young athletes and coaches. So, but it was all based on awareness raising. We know at that time that it was not enough. Of course, if we will start talking about this issue, is important that we have a system that respond when it start to appear these cases, because it's natural that it start to appear some cases. And if sport organizations are not prepared, and if we don't have a system implemented in our country, that will be a problem. It is already a problem, but when we start to talk and we put in the field a campaign like the Start to Talk campaign, we may be in risk to have more cases. So, fortunately, the job that we have done through ProSafe Sport has made possible for us to be in the limit number of countries that the Council of Europe invite to be involved in this new project. There are only 6 countries, that 6 member states that are involved, which are Austria, Belgium, Norway, Israel, and Bosnia-Herzegovina. And so it was in a very good time for us that we could be able to have this support from the Council of Europe to develop this new project. This new project started in March and will end in October 21. And as I said, it's based on this important methodology, which is the International Safeguard Children in Sport, which intends to produce a journey for us to reach the safeguarding children in sport. This journey will be do it through the development in Portugal of a roadmap, where we will go through the 8 steps of these international safeguards. And with this, we intend to, by the end, to have this system in place in our country. But this project also focuses in a particular issue, which is the setting up of child safeguarding officers, roles within our sport organization. In a recent study has shown that this is a central element of good governance for child protection in sport, as these safeguarding officers will take the role of a moral guardian for sport organizations. So this is the main object of the project, which is called Safeguarding Children in Sport. We already start to follow the steps that are established. The first one was to work in a partnership. So by the end of July, we have established our national strategic partnership involving the most influent sport organization in the sport sector, but also in the protection of children in general, and involving also athletes. It is the voice of the athletes is important to have in this process, and involving also some expert like Joanna, which is one of our members of this group.
So great, Christina. I will come back to you again to a more in-depth analysis, but you have setting the scene about what our government is doing and how is pushing to move things further in a comprehensive manner, involving not only national sport governing bodies, but also academia and child protection agency and the vast majority of the most important stakeholders here in Portugal. Your contribution was very, very important to setting the scene and to realize the dimension of the endeavor we have had. And moving things is important to, in my opinion, to break some urban legends and to, in order to deliver this kind of programs, to be strengthened in a strong evidence-based. And this is one of the key issues when we are dealing with non-accidental violence in sport, is the lack of robust evidence. And so I will now move to academia and to the research field. Joanna, we used to say that sport, notably some specific sports, those who have a really physical and frequent contact, are fertile ground to all sorts of non-accidental violence, notably sexual harassment and sexual abuse, as we have seen in recent documentaries about the Nassar scandal. In which extent your research and the evidence confirm this perception? Is really sport a fertile ground to psychological and sexual abuse, or is it has the same problems as other areas like education and others where kids are used to be present? What's your view and your opinion about this?
Good morning to all. I would also like to thank the chance to be here to share ideas and to discuss this very sensitive topic. I would like to first to say that about 1 in 10 children will be sexually abused before they turn 18. And in sports, that number is a little bit different. So 1 in 7 child will be sexually abused before they turn 18. So numbers are greater in sport contexts. So the studies we currently have at our disposal show that between 2 and 8% of minor age athletes are victims of sexual abuse within the context of sport. So we are talking about an important topic here. We have several risk factors within sports. We have this power and powerless relation. So, for example, coaches can choose who is going to play, for example. We have this special trust relationship. And of course, in some modalities, we have this physical contact that is needed. The sports internships or changing rooms are also identified as risk factors. If we look to individual or group modalities, numbers, at least in some studies, don't show differences, but we know that the risk is higher for high performance athletes. So this one perpetrator, one child circumstances increase the risk of a child of being sexually abused. We need not to be afraid, but we need to be vigilant, because there's plenty of negative impacts in children, either physical, either psychological, like anxiety, depression, and other, and also some social psychological impacts. So we really need to be vigilant and don't be a bystander. By bystander, I mean that we just know that something might be happening, but we don't do anything. So we really need to improve sports contexts and try to have some safeguarding systems working on, because mainly it is very difficult for children to disclose. So more or less 38% of child victims disclose, but the rest of the children do not disclose. So we have this issue also. And when we give the opportunities for children to talk about sexual abuse, they really disclose. So we really need to pay attention to this. There is also some data, mainly I would say from Canada, for example, that they show the number of sexual offenses. For example, between 1998 and 2018, they showed that some sports modalities have greater numbers of sexual offenders, like hockey, soccer, martial arts, basketball, swimming, baseball, volleyball. But as I said before, the main risk factor is to be a high performance athlete. I don't know, João.
Thank you very much. Your insights and remarks were very, very important to hand over the floor to Miguel, because most of the risk factors that you have raised are distinctive traits of sport, and so we need to cope with them in our daily business. But you have said a very important remark. We need to move to be bystanders, to be more vigilant, and that links with what Christina has said. To be vigilant, we need to know what to do once some issue has been raised, or when we notice some kind of different behavior in young athletes. And Miguel, bearing this in mind, we often notice that bullying and psychological abuse, I would say, is somehow tolerated and part of the game if you want to succeed in a high level sport. And we have seen this in recent documentaries, and myself I deal with this at the National Olympic Committee almost every single day. And in your opinion, according to your research, what strategies we need to implement to break this mindset that is still ingrained and embedded in the sports culture, in order to move the way to a real athlete's first sport development career?
Hi, good morning. Happy to participate. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Well, the thing is, we are here talking about moral and sexual abuse, but there are many types of abuse in sport, and there is a considerable lack of programs to prevent these kind of behaviors and episodes. I think the problem mostly, at least one of the big issues, is that people don't know what to do. There are some coaches who don't know how to proceed if they face such episodes. Well, regarding the sports mentality, that's one of the, well, there are many important ideas to share here. We won't have time for that, to address all of them, but the sport mentality is one of them. I think there are different levels of prevention that should be considered. One of them is the macro level. It involves the policies, of course, that were already addressed by Cristina and Joanna, but also campaigns campaigns to tackle this mentality, this tough mentality that sport is this winning at all cost mentality and this tough mentality, which is quite typical in sport. Things are getting better. If we take a look at the evolutions of sports in the last decades, there is a growing number of women involved in sports, even the minorities. Things have considerably changed, but there's still a lot to do. There's some research. It was conducted in Canada. It was very interesting with professional swimming athletes, and it showed that in the first years of their professional careers, they much more easily used to accept different types of abuse and consider those that abuse normal to achieve success. And when they were reaching the final phase of their careers, there was they start to challenge those ideas, and they started to criticize much more often coaches, institutions, and the whole sports mentality, because they start to perceive those behaviors and those episodes as abuse and not things that are normal and should be tolerated. This is one of the major difficulties to prevent abuse in sports, because it's a very competitive setting. It was also made originally based on underpinned in the very masculine stereotype. So there are many forms of abuse that are still tolerated because of the mentality that is widely accepted. Well, there's much to be done. Here I talked about this macro intervention, which is important. Some campaigns, for example, it's important to make some campaigns about successful histories of coaches and athletes who have a positive relation, and athletes still can reach sport success, and to challenge this idea that if you want to win, if you want to be a champion, you must suffer a lot. Well, people have to suffer in their training because it's very demanding. It's not the same that suffer some types of abuse. That's quite different. And sometimes people and many stakeholders in sport don't realize the difference between one thing and another. If we talk about a more local intervention, there is a considerable lack of programs. Some countries are more developed here. Canada and even countries in UK have already started. They also started with prevention of other forms of abuse, even in school setting, for example. And here there's a lot to do. But there's one problem. I'm not going to talk about all the things we can do in the sport clubs because it's a lot. And but I think there are two important things that I must talk here so we can think about them. One of them is that many things are done in a macro level, but don't reach the micro level. So policies are developed, but sport clubs, and what the scientific research shows us is that sport clubs in many situations don't know the policies, and the policies, they feel that the policies don't reach that micro level. So here's a problem, and we have to think how we can work at the macro level and make it reach the more local level. And another question. Okay.
Allow me to interrupt you and keep your other question, because the first one is really, really important to exchange views with you and with Bruno. You have underlined the relevance to have an holistic approach to tackle this issue from individual side to a more macro level. But what we need to take into account, and we have seen what happened in the United States, where they have huge technical reporting systems, and even so, this kind of behavior was somehow normalized throughout decades, not years. And this raises a serious concern when we realize that some countries, like Portugal, for instance, and I would say the vast majority of the European countries, rely a lot on a voluntary basis on their clubs, grassroots clubs, but even on sport governing bodies. And so this is very challenging to put in place. How can we deliver a meaningful, robust and holistic approach if we don't have, first, qualified people on safeguarding, and probably that can be somehow solved in a kind of program like the ones that Christina has said. But when we have top decision makers who are voluntaries and are not aware to the impact of this problem, and so Bruno, this and you are a man on the field, leaves me a really concrete question. Do you really think that this wave of recent scandals that somehow prove the difficulty to implement an holistic approach like the one that Miguel has just underlined, it somehow can jeopardize not only the reputation of sport governing bodies, but even the autonomy of sports, and this can pave the way to a new era of sport governance and reform in sport governing bodies, as we have seen with the recent approval of the Empowering Olympic, Paralympic and Amateur Athletes Act by the House of Representatives in the US, with a bipartisan approval from Democrats and Republicans. Do you really think that we are now moving to a new era, or this is just a kind of issues that have been raised due to a couple of accidents and things will keep pretty much the same? What are your thoughts about this?
Thank you for the question, João. First of all, I want to thank the invitation, for being here, for being among these such experts and such friends. Your question is quite good, because from one side seems that we are walking through a better moment, because in general sports system, and I'm not talking about our country or a specific country or a specific sport, but the global sports system is more aware about the situation and about this issue. But I'm not so optimistic about some local events that can, or some local policies, like it can be considered the case of Portugal. Seems that has happened in the United States. We need to have some mediatic case that push us to act. And for example, everyone knows about the recent scandals, and not only the Nasser scandal, but some others in Spain. There were many. But if you do a Google search about these topics, you only find the studies and some reports about the study of Miguel and Joanna, or the projects of the Council of Europe. So it seems that it is a silent issue, like Christina said before. And this is something that must worry us. We must be worried about it, because things are happening, policies are being produced, policies are being implemented, documents are being published, but in Portugal seems that we are not feeling yet the problem. And maybe if we think we didn't have a big scandal regarding the topic. And this is something that must worry, because we shouldn't expect for the scandal to proceed in the development of a policy. And we should be working in a lesson learned system in order to do the transfer of knowledge regarding what happened in the other countries. And this should be a multi-sectorial approach. It must be a government approach, considering sport as a whole, as a country. It must be a specific sport approach in each one of the sport specificities, because, for example, you know, I'm a martial arts coach in karate and judo, and there are some specificities in this sport that must be considered in terms of pedagogical treatment by the coaches. And at the same way, you need a public campaign for people, regular citizens, to understand that this is really an issue that must be discussed and must be considered in terms of policy, in terms of practices. This is, I think, this is the main view I can have at this moment, and it is only solved, I think, through training. The International Olympic Committee yesterday or 2 days ago, they launched they launched the new about the creation of a new course, and this seems a very important opportunity for NOCs, but also for countries and also for specific sports, in order to start involving people, managers and coaches and other sports human resources in training about this issue that somehow for many people is not an issue yet. It's something that is happening, but it's not so regular. Just to finish, the Portuguese government actually is being done somehow a nice work with the national plan for ethics in sport, but it seems that it's not enough. One thing is to remark the value of sport. Other thing is to work towards the integrity of sport. And this is not the same. So we need to go further and give one step more in this line.
Thank you, Bruno. I want to pick your last remark and move again to Miguel. I didn't forget your second topic, but one thing that is quite frequent in sports, and this is just not a case in Portugal when we are dealing with integrity issues, is really we are more reactive than proactive, and we have seen only after some scandals, as Bruno underlined, sports umbrella organizations have done meaningful actions in order to tackle this, because before that, usually they tend to minimize or live on denial. Unfortunately, I would say, as Sinatra once sang, that's life. But my question to you is, what we can do other than raising awareness campaigns in order to move this issue up in the concern and in the agenda of decision makers, to break what is a distinctive trait of sport, not only on sexual abuse, but in other areas like violence, like doping, like manipulation of sports competitions, like corruption, which is the code of silence. My question is very direct to you. In the end of the day, do you think that when an athlete report is a matter of jeopardizing their career versus protect themselves from a threat that usually is a threat that is already an evidence because some acts have been perpetrated? Do you think that ultimately this is the dilemma of an athlete, and how we can overcome this dilemma in order to have an effective reporting system, and the athletes and other sports people know when these issues arise, they are able to report without consequences for them, but knowing that the authorities and sport governing bodies will follow up the issue until the last resort. I know it's a difficult question, but I want to hear not only you, Miguel, but first you and then the other speakers about this.
Well, I think the athletes have several and different dilemmas. Some of them, if they feel that something is really bad, many athletes don't break silence, especially in cases of sexual harassment and abuse. Well, many of them because they are afraid of the consequences. No one listens to them in many cases, and some of them who really want to reach sport success, that especially if the relationship is with the coach, this might interfere in their career, and that's quite important. And there's also one thing that happens a lot, especially in most of the clubs, because most of the clubs are small clubs. When we talk about sport clubs, the major clubs are only a minority. Many athletes feel that if I'm going to talk with another coach, this coach is probably a friend, or even sometimes is the same family of the coach, who I'm accusing. So I think that's very important to have independent units between this macro intervention and more local intervention. And as the safeguarding officers that Christina talked, these safeguarding officers within the clubs and within these units who may help the athletes, because sometimes they feel trapped inside the sport club. But there's also another important thing here. Sport clubs resist a lot to this kind of prevention programs, as happened with, for example, schools with bullying prevention programs, because they feel that if they are addressing this topic, they may be misinterpreted as a club where sexual abuse or harassment occurs. So it's quite important to sensitize the clubs that if they have a prevention program, doesn't mean they have episodes of sexual abuse or harassment in their club. They are avoiding this to happen, because many clubs are afraid of being labeled as a club where bullying occurs, where sexual harassment occurs, so they resist to implement these programs. And these programs must protect the victims, but at the same time make another very difficult and important thing too. It's to avoid false accusations, because sometimes also the clubs, the sport clubs, and even the coaches resist to these prevention programs because they are very afraid of false accusations. Imagine what might be the consequences of false accusation of, for example, a coach who hasn't done anything. So, but the programs today are built with many different measures, and they should protect the sports stakeholders and obviously also the athletes, and especially the young athletes. So I think there are different dilemmas and many things to deal here, but programs to prevent abuse and different types of abuse already exist, some of them with very good results, and they can be implemented in different countries and different contexts.
Thank you, Miguel. It is very important, your last remarks. And this, Christina, raises me a question, which is, and you also came from sport, notably for a sport who has been dealing with lots of cases of sexual harassment and abuse, which is gymnastics. And you know that the pressure in that specific sport since early years is too high, as we have seen in the recent documentaries, Athlete Hague and the Art of Gold. And somehow this is tolerated and normalized by the young gymnastics, and this doesn't happen also only in gymnastics. And we live somehow in a bubble between the coach and the athlete. And in the Nasser scandal, we have seen that the reporting mechanisms of the sport governing bodies, they completely failed, and usually the athletes tend to live on this kind of bubble, tend to normalize this kind of behaviors, and they think it's part of their treatment, as the documentary clearly discloses. What do you think about other strategies to break this code of silence, notably pressure from external actors, notably child protection agencies, for instance, think tanks related to research and to stand up for athletes' rights and child protection, and last but not the least, to somehow change the curricula of training coaches to put these issues as mandatory in their basic training, with at the same level playing field with other issues. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, we can produce every system that you want, but there is something very important that Miguel has already mentioned, that is a change in our sport culture, which is important. Not only regarding the win at all cost or no pain, no gain, that are very strong beliefs that we have, but also start to believe in children's, in athletes when they say they have been abused. I remind you that victims from the Larry Nasser case have been molested for several years before they were heard. And also in the Michigan University, there was in the reports at least 14 people that were reported of the incidents and that were silenced. So at least 14 people in the university system, not in the gymnastic federation, appear also to have failed with to respond to this crisis for help from the athlete students in the university. So it is important to demystify this myth that children and athletes usually make up stories on abuse. So it is very important. And what Miguel said about clubs, I heard a lot, not only in clubs, but in coaches. It's the first thing they say. Oh, but there is a lot of stories that are making up. We should not listen. So this is something that we must at all efforts to break. We should believe in athletes and we should hear the children. Another thing is the change of our sport culture, because if it happened also in the education culture, if we could remember, so we can do it in sport also. This no pain, no gain belief, or win at all costs, is very damaging for the athletes, because they identified with these beliefs. So there is a lot of violence among the athletes, especially elite athletes, and there is a lot of pressure guiding by the success at all costs. So we should also try to change, and there is a big importance shift that we should do to a more athlete-centered culture, where they are human being, they are not machines, and they should be treated like human beings. And regarding the gymnastics in particular, as other early specialization sports, we have a big problem that we have children and teenagers working as adult and elite athletes. So this introduces another aspect that is specific from this kind of sports, and where especially girls have a short window to success in this whole culture that we speak. So they are not going to rocking the boat. They are going to deal with all the violence because they know they have these short windows. So we have the big set for all the sport culture, but in specific sports, we have also to deal with some specific problems, like Bruno also said.
Okay, thank you very much for your throughout remarks, Christina. You have just touched a very important topic, and we are closing to an end. Time goes fast, but I want to raise a final question to Joanna, which is, we are often speak about the sports culture and these traits that all of us have been shared throughout this session. But to change a culture, we need to place ourselves in a position where change is structural, and there are tools to do that. And usually decision makers have to balance those tools, meaning the carrot, encourage and promote best practice, raising awareness, as some of our speakers have said. But we should not forget that we need to enforce the law. We need to be more demanding to meeting standards, and standards that are widely accepted by the academic community and even from the sports organizations. And that is the first step to center this issue in the athlete protection and not be tolerated with these cases. But I want to hear from you to wrap up about a specific issue, which is how can parents and other relevant stakeholders be more demanding in terms of the quality of the service that is delivered to his young kids? Because what I feel when I'm in the field is parents are usually very demanding when you have your kid and your children in theater, in music, learning languages, but somehow they still look to sport as a kind of an entertainment where they put the kids as a pastime. Or on the other hand, they think that, and they have the aspiration that their young kids will be Cristiano Ronaldos, and there is no a middle range approach. And how can we change this setting in order to have a more demanding culture, as Christina said, to put athletes and put young athletes and their protection in the center of this process?
I will try to be very brief because of the time, but let me say first something. I was listening to the others, and in sports we have this particular context where reputation is an important issue. So if we are raising these problems in sports, this raises also problems in terms of the reputation of clubs, of some modalities. So they can lose sponsors, they can lose athletes. So it is very tricky in this context. And overall, people do not want to talk about sexual abuse. It's really a taboo, even at educational, in education contexts. So the main the main issue is to settle specific norms, and norms should be settled by governments and then go from the top to the bottom. So if we settle specific norms, as we did it, for example, in Portugal in domestic violence or so, then we can settle more local norms in clubs. And we need to be very clear in terms of the rules, in terms of the boundaries, and we need to inform either the coaches, as Bruno, for example, said before, like specific, including training, but also to inform parents. And we really need to give information, because the grooming process of perpetrators, it's very tricky. A sexual offender do not abuse suddenly a child. It's a grooming process. So he or she tries to have the trust of the child, try to legitimize all the behaviors like Nazar did it. So, and the child, even he or she feel blamed if he or she will talk about that. So we really need to inform. There's, for example, in Spain already some materials that it's prevention materials, and we explain to children what is good touches, bad touches, what should be a good secret, a bad secret, and in who they can trust. And this is really important. And the parents need also to be aware of this, because, as you said, sometimes parents just want to have a Cristiano Ronaldo at home, and they just do things that they are not aware that they can have implications for their kids.
Thank you very much, Joanna. Thank you very much, Christina, Miguel, and Bruno. Your insights were very important. As we know, this is a endless issue with lots of dimensions that we need to go in depth, and it's impossible to cover them in 1 hour. But I want to underline 3 or 4 aspects that are clearly key to move and to pave this way to reach a more protected environment for young athletes. First and foremost, to raise awareness, not only in sport community, but in overall society, to tackle this issue in a comprehensive manner and a collaborative partnership involving other stakeholders. Then to be vigilant and to build capacity within the sports community, notably training safeguarding officers to really detect and early tackle these issues. And last but not the least is very, very important in order to safeguard the reputation that Joanna clearly said it is very important to be protected, to abide by the law, to implement a top-down comprehensive policy to tackle this issue. So thank you very much to you all. It was an impressive and very, very important webinar, and I will hand over the floor to the next section. Thank you very much to you all.
Thank you.